Good morning. My name is Ron Latz, State Senator from St. Louis Park. I'm the minority lead in the Senate on the Judiciary Committee. Since the Republican Party took over the majority in the Senate after the 2016 elections, we have been asking for but have received no public hearings on addressing specifically reducing gun violence, in particular my two proposals supported by the people behind me over many years now to expand criminal background checks for gun purchases and to implement extreme risk protective orders. Those of you who watched the Judiciary Committee know for the last two sessions, at the end of most of the committee hearings, especially toward the end of session, as it became clear we were moving past deadlines and substantive hearings on proposals, I kept asking, when are we going to have a bill? When are we going to have a hearing? And the response I kept getting was either we don't have authority from the leadership yet, or we're going to see we're pretty full with our schedule and so on. So now in January or December, just before the coming election year, the public supporting by 80 and 90% of both of these proposals, we are now having an informational hearing to remind us what existing laws look like. It seems to me this is more political window dressing than it is a serious attempt to address gun violence in Minnesota. And I think the public will recognize it as such. It's unfortunate that existing laws do not cover the territory, the proposals that we are supporting here today. There are gaps in existing statutes, and these gaps can be filled with these two proposals, and they are proven effective around the country in terms of reducing gun violence and reducing suicides. 78% of gun deaths in Minnesota are by suicide, not by homicide. So these are very real issues, and we'd like to be able to address them. I want to note not only those behind me who are supporting me on these efforts. We're all working together as a team, but Senator Bach, our minority caucus lead, is attending an important meeting in his district today, so he couldn't join us. But he did ask me to convey his support, that he is here with us in spirit, and he would like us to have public hearings of full vetting and discussion about these things so that we can make progress on these issues. With that said, I want to introduce Ramsey County Attorney John Choi, who's been a longtime supporter of these efforts. John.
Thank you, Senator Latz, and my name is John Choi, and I serve the people of Ramsey County as their county attorney. And when I found out that there were going to be hearings at the Capitol, and they were going to be talking about some of the gun violence issues, and I found out that they weren't going to be talking about some really simple things that really need to be enacted here in the state of Minnesota. It's supported by a vast, vast majority of our public, but more importantly, I believe that if we were to enact universal background checks, enact red flag laws, this type of legislation can actually make a difference in reducing gun violence in our communities, not only here in St. Paul, but across the state of Minnesota. Every gun is manufactured legally, but at some point in time, what ends up happening is through a series of transfers, straw purchases, or whatever it might be, they get into the wrong hands. And universal background checks would be a part of that solution. And I'm not here to say that that is going to be the one solution that's going to fix everything for all of us. The issue of gun violence is a complex one in our society. We need to have comprehensive approaches. But time and time again, I think law enforcement, people who are on the front lines have said over and over that having universal background checks so that we can get to some of these illegal transfers would actually make a difference. And so I ask the people who have the power here at the Capitol to listen to the voices of the people who are demanding action, that we take action to reduce gun violence and so many deaths in our community as a result of gun violence. Every year, if you just total up all of the people who have been killed by gunfire in my community, that's like having a mass shooting. But I feel like we're not galvanizing as a community coming together to care about those young people. And so I would like the conversation to change, to think about the solutions, to think about public health approaches to gathering data so that we can have better understanding of how we can tackle these issues. So thank you very much.
Very well. I'll introduce Bob Marcros, Survivor Network.
Thank you, Senator. I stand before you as a gun owner, a survivor of gun violence, and a veteran of the armed forces. Quote, "The gun lobby's interpretation of the Second Amendment is one of the greatest pieces of fraud. I repeat the word fraud on the American people by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime," unquote. These words were spoken by conservative Supreme Court Chief Justice Warren Burger in a 1990 Parade magazine article. As a result of the gun manufacturing industry's influence through the NRA on our elected politicians to get guns everywhere, our country now finds itself standing alone in the world when it comes to gun violence. I'd like to ask the NRA and their members to join in the public discussion on this issue. I find it amazingly timely that a hearing on guns is being held just after the 7th anniversary of the shooting at Sandy Hook. More children have been killed by guns in this country since Sandy Hook than U.S. soldiers in combat since 9/11, a full 11 years more time. In 2017, there were 144 police officers who died in the line of duty. There were approximately 1,000 active duty military personnel who died throughout the world. Well, during that time, there were 2,462 school-aged children who were killed by firearms. Our children's lives should not be the price we pay for the Second Amendment. The NRA's goal of guns everywhere is not working, and it is a clear and present danger to our society. This is only profit-driven for the gun manufacturing industry. We are now teaching our kids to stand up to armed intruders during lockdowns. We would much prefer our elected officials to stand up to the NRA's losing agenda instead. As our government is obligated, per the Constitution, to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and posterity. This can only happen by strengthening our gun laws so we can feel safe in our parks, shopping malls, nightclubs, churches, and so forth. The NRA is working contrary to these founding principles. A well-regulated militia does not mean an unregulated armed populace wreaking havoc on our peace and tranquility on a daily basis. It is time to listen to the words of Justice Antonin Scalia when in Heller versus D.C. he said, quote, "Like most rights, the rights secured by the Second Amendment are not unlimited," unquote. Background checks and red flag laws will help shore up our gun laws and are proven to save lives. We need to come together, both sides, and have a public discussion on this issue. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for coming today. I'm Reverend Nancy Nord-Bentz, Executive Director of Protect Minnesota, the only independent state-based gun violence prevention group in Minnesota. We receive no funding from the national groups. Protect Minnesota is heartened to see that Senate Judiciary Chair Warren Limmer is concerned enough about violence prevention in our communities that he has scheduled today's committee hearing. But limiting the scope of the hearing to the review of current laws is like checking the batteries in the smoke alarms when your house is on fire. It's a very good thing to do on a regular basis, but not the thing that will save the most lives now during a crisis. Chairman Limmer, we have a crisis of gun violence in Minnesota going on right now. According to Gun Violence Archive, the number of Minnesotans killed in interpersonal gun violence when one person shoots someone else increased from 62 total last year to 127 so far this year, more than doubling. And the number of Minnesotans who've been injured by gun violence has increased by more than a third. These numbers do not include suicides, which account for nearly 80% of Minnesota's gun death. The victims of these shootings have been men, women, and most tragically, children living across the state. Today we will hear a lot about the greater Twin Cities area, but you need to know that no district, no community in our state is immune from gun violence. The state is on fire. We call upon Chair Warren Limmer and the majority leaders in the Senate to really take seriously the fact that there is smoke and flames, and do what needs to be done to deal with the situation, to deal with the crisis, which is to pass the 2 gun bills that have passed already in the House, that the governor stands ready to sign, and that have been proven to be most effective at preventing gun violence in other states. Yeah. And I'm talking about the criminal background checks bill and the extreme risk protection order bill, or red flag law. This is what we need to do to save Minnesotans during a time of crisis. After that, let's check the batteries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the hearing's going to begin in a few minutes inside. We may have a minute or so for questions if there are any. All right, thank you.